Okay, so I understand that learning something brand new can be incredibly frustrating. So I'm going to take the opportunity to teach you what I know about Fusion 360 based on my real world experience of things that I've actually used to create things like end products, prop replicas, prosthetics, even prototypes that I've worked with other companies developing. I'm going to pull from all of that experience and create a series of Fusion 360 tutorials from beginner to pro in like 30 days or so. Hey, that rhymed.
Is that bad poetry or...
And if this is something that you want to learn, please follow along, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the very next lesson in this series. I don't know why I did that. Oh, so now that we got that really windy intro out of the way, let's take a look at the very first lesson, which is exploring the digital workspace that is Fusion 360 when you open it for the first time. You'll probably see something that looks a little bit like this. Now, don't be too scared if your top menu bar doesn't look like mine, or if you see this instead of not seeing that, or even if you see this panel popped out over here. We're gonna get to that in a second. But first, let's explore what we're looking at right here. This is essentially like graph paper, which you're probably already familiar with. Plotting points, you're drawing lines, you're making shapes, you're connecting them, but then you're going to bring them into a third dimension. But essentially that is what you're looking at here. The first thing that I think is important to know is how to just navigate around the workspace here. If you're using a laptop and a trackpad, please just save your fingers and your wrists and everything and get a mouse with a third button and scroll wheel. When you use your scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. When you push down on that scroll wheel as a button, you can then pan around the workspace. And if you hold down the shift key and again push down on that middle mouse button, you can orbit around. You can do all of the same things with this view cube over here. So if you ever get lost in space and you don't know where the heck you are, you can always come over here to this view cube and hit the home button, and it'll take you right back to that 3/4 view at the origin. You can click on some of these faces. You can use the arrows to navigate around the different views. You can rotate it. You can even select like the top view at an angle and the corner view is like a 3/4. But if you insist on using something like a laptop, you can use the view cube, or down here, you can also click on an orbit tool, pan around with this hand icon tool. You can zoom in and out. The same camera settings that can be found down here, if you right click on this view cube, you can get a lot of that same stuff in a quick menu that pops up. I'm going to come back to the set current view as later on, but I want to touch on what that means right now because it is important. So if you right click on this cube, you will see set current view as. When we get into sketching, the set current view is going to be something that you're going to want to know where it is because it can affect how you orbit and navigate around your work environment. And if you find yourself trying to orbit around and it's just getting really funky, try and resetting your top and front views based on what you want them to be. And that's pretty much navigating around the workspace here in a nutshell. But let's get into some more specific details. You're going to find a menu up here at the top. You're going to find this thing down here at the bottom that looks like a VCR and then just a big long gray area. You're going to see maybe this over here. And if you don't, you can pop it out with this icon that is 9 squares. And also you see this thing here that says browser, and if you don't, you can pop it out that way. First, let's start over here in this data panel. And what this is basically just a collection of the things that you make. This is for organization, and everything that you do within Fusion 360, or really anything, should be based on organization. So you can easily get to it, so you can find it, so you're not frustrated. So what I'm gonna do is create a brand new project. And I'm gonna call this Fusion in 30. And when I do that, it creates this thing called Fusion in 30. Now, if I double click on it, it opens up this right here. It's basically just a folder. It's a place to put all the things related to that topic, in this case, Fusion in 30. So if I were to start a sketch and then save it, it's going to save over here. Now, I know this is jumping a little bit ahead, but don't worry too much. I just wanted to show you as an example. When I created that sketch just a second ago to show you that I could save something and it shows up in the data panel, it also created a brand new folder over here on the left browser tree, which is this right here, called sketch number 1. And I can name anything over here whatever I want to. I'll just call this example. It's always a good idea to name your things, whether it's a sketch or later on 3D bodies, so you know what each thing is. You don't have to go hunting around for whatever when you have to make changes. Also, down here in the thing that looks like the VCR and the big gray space, this is called a timeline. The timeline is essentially just a history of all the things that you've done over the creation of whatever it is you're creating. It could be a sketch, it could be creating a three-dimensional thing, it could be all of the things that go into whatever. It's a record of all of that. You could have 100, 200 things down here in the timeline, and if you need to make a change all the way back at the very beginning, instead of going through and essentially redoing everything, Fusion 360 uses what's called parametric modeling. And all I'd have to do is find it down here in the timeline, double click on that thing, and it allows me to make an edit to it. And then it'll auto update everything after that. That's why knowing what the timeline is important. If you right click on the things over in the browser tree over here, you can also just go and edit them too. So you see that some of the areas do overlap, but they're not all the same. I'm going to turn on show with the eyeball icon, the origin. This is the center point of the X, Y, and Z axes. These yellow squares represent just essentially pieces of paper, planes, that we can draw our sketches on. And the last thing that I want to touch on is this top menu. So you have all kinds of things that you can do. Over here, we see probably a default of design. You see
generative design, render, animation, simulation, manufacturing, drawing.
Those are all great and very useful, but for people who are just getting into this, 90% of the time is going to be spent in design. With that said, that brings us to the top menu up here. Yours may look a little different, but don't freak out if it does, okay? Each one of these words with a chevron, the little triangle beside it, is a drop-down menu. 98.23% of the time, you're going to be in create and modify only. So those are the only two things that I really want to hammer home. Create, all of this is related to creating a sketch or creating an object, a body, which we'll get to later. Modify is centered around modifying a body once it's created. Okay, so that is the very first condensed episode of Fusion in 30. And it's just about navigating and exploring the work environment that you're going to be in for the subsequent episodes that we get into. But just know that we're going to be doing the majority of our work in the design environment with Solid in mind. And that's based on, again, my experience with the real world stuff that I've worked with. That's not saying your use case is going to be the same. It's just saying that all of the things that we're going to go over are absolutely transposable to these other workspaces if you need to use them. If this is something that you're enjoying, please like the video. Comment down below if you have something to add to the conversation or if there's something that you would like me to cover later on. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode of Fusion in 30. And speaking of, in the next episode, we're going to be creating our very first sketches, going over the 2D creation process, and you don't want to miss it. And until then, I'll see you later.